Today I start season 3. In it, I will present to you guys Steven. Steven is a dear colleague of mine. We studied together during our masters here in Germany. He is also an ESL teacher, and with him, I will be discussing the hottest topics in the ESL world. I hope you guys enjoy. Today, in our first video, we will be discussing online teaching. It is very challenging, and there are many advantages, believe it or not, and there are a lot of disadvantages. Steven and I will probably be making a few videos on this topic, and I hope you guys can follow us and follow our videos. Alright, have a good time, and I hope you enjoy. Steven, thank you and welcome to the Gustavo Milanese channel. You and I come quite a way now, I guess, and it's a pleasure having you here.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so let's dive in. Steven, let's talk about ESL teaching, which is our specialty, and I would like to talk about online teaching because it has been quite a roller coaster of emotions out there for teachers. Do you see anything as? Let's go. What do you think about ESL online teaching?
Well, it's interesting. I've done it both, I guess you would say, on purpose, for an online institute. And I've also done it lately, like in the past couple of months, because face-to-face classes were no longer able to be face-to-face. I think it's generally good, but I think it depends on, are you treating online classes as their own thing, or are you trying to move a classroom class online? Because I don't think that works as well as people want to believe it does. But if you tailor the class around the programs you're using and just the advantages that you can get from being online, I think it does work.
Okay, so let's talk about the advantages and disadvantages of online teaching. Do you see any advantages out there when we actually prepare a class online? Do you say like, oh, this would be easier to explain here than would be in a classroom?
Easier to explain, I guess, in the sense that if you have the right program, you have more control as a teacher of the input that your students are receiving. Some programs allow you to upload or share PowerPoints with the students. And when you do that, you can really control the pace better. You can really do a lot more. Whereas in the classroom, they have books, and in theory, they're looking at the books, but it's easy for them to sort of get off place or to drift off. And with the PowerPoint, you can sort of keep them on track a bit better, in my experience at least.
But do you have I find myself once teaching, I do a private class nowadays, and I see the student doing much better because I can share my screen. And then I have so much more control on Google Translator, and then I have the other screen. If you know a little bit your shortcuts and what you do here and there, is so much better.
Yeah. You can also cheat a little bit more. Like you were saying, like you could have Google Translate open, you could have a dictionary app open, you can have all these things that, if you don't 100% know the answer, you have ways of finding the answer without the students really being aware.
So when you see all these many students together and you have to deal with this kind of situation, as a teacher, do you think that is it better if I have a presentation rather than a class? Only if I do a presentation, I do the grammar, I explain everything, and I let the students do after the class. What do you think about?
You mean like where the teacher does all of the speaking, or like basically making like a YouTube video that you show them?
Basically, yeah. Because there is no, if you're gonna do over 30, I think it's undoable.
Right. That's interesting. I hadn't really thought about that before. I will say in the class that I took as a student, I don't think the teacher's personal teaching style was very. I don't think it adapted very well to being online. I think she needed to be in the classroom so she could sort of feel the mood in the classroom. But also, I don't think she would have benefited from just turning it into a lecture. Um, I've never heard of that before. Doing a language class as a lecture seems a bit old school, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But it's an idea. But you would have to let the students ask questions, and I guess it depends too on the students, the type of students you have. Where do you need to, kind of squeeze questions out of them, or will they stop you and ask the questions as they need them?
Yeah,
Uh,
that's one thing that I want to get, because that's a specific point. Because when you have 30, you cannot have 30 people asking questions. And believe me, they are having many more questions nowadays than they used in the classroom.
mhm.
Because people can go online and they can actually do, okay, I'm sorry, I don't understand that because of this, and that. So you cannot have 30 people asking questions. There are students that are going to wait at least 10 to 15 minutes just to ask a question. And it has to be in order.
Yeah. That's, now that I think about it, I guess one benefit of doing it that way is that because it's online, it's one thing to do a lecture in a classroom, and it's another one to do it online, because then the student can pause and rewind and things like that. So if they miss something, they can go back. Or if they don't understand something, they can pause, they could look it up, they could sort of get a general idea of what they need to know and then continue. Whereas, in a classroom, especially in like a lecture hall where there's more than 30 people there, that's not a possibility.
Yeah. So we talk a little bit of advantages and also the disadvantages of online teaching. But do you see anything like the students are lacking nowadays with online teaching that it's horrible? It's just like if you were in a classroom, it would be much better.
Could you repeat the question?
Like with all the disadvantages that the students are having nowadays with online classes, do you see any disadvantage that is so big, that is that is so harmful compared to the class that they were having? For instance, you don't have a problem with discipline anymore. You don't have students talking to each other, and you don't have conversations around. You have other people talking in their homes. So, but at the same time, are the students focused as they would be in class?
Um, that's hard to say. Personally, like what you were saying, it's better this way, because if a student is bored or disinterested or whatever, and they start, you know, they stop paying attention, they start doing other stuff, I think that's more of a problem in a classroom, because then they start to distract other people. Whereas online, because their microphone's off anyway, no one else is even really aware that it's happening. Some teachers I've noticed want you to have the camera on all the time, so they can see that you're there. And I suppose it's true that if the camera was off, students are more likely to do anything else. But that would only affect them. It wouldn't affect other students. And I think that's often the problem in a classroom. Is it's kind of a snowball effect where one student can pull in other students, and then you have, a quarter of the class is not paying attention. Whereas here, it's because it's so isolated, it doesn't really spread out to the other students.
I see. But as well, you would be one of those teachers that would have the camera on or the camera off.
I prefer camera off.
You prefer camera off, and why? How come?
Are we talking my camera or their cameras?
Let's say the student's camera first.
I just don't see any benefit of it. Especially because they're right there. It's one thing in a classroom where you can sort of get an idea of whether or not they're paying attention. But, with online, especially if you have like a PowerPoint or a PDF or something that they're supposed to be looking at, you have no idea what they're looking at. They could be watching YouTube for all you know. There's no real way of knowing, so I'm not really sure that you get the same benefit that you would in the classroom.
I see. And as a teacher, would you like to have your camera on all the time, or would you also like to have your camera off?
I personally would prefer to have my camera off. I guess I don't see the point, because a lot of the times, in the one class I took, it was just the teacher was there, like her hand on her head on her hands. There was no benefit to seeing her face. I mean, I guess maybe if you're getting into like mouthing the words, like very low level students, maybe. Um, but I think that's kind of an exception.
Yeah, I understand. And last but not least on these videos, do you have any interesting stories that come to mind? Because I have one of the students who have the microphones or have problems with the computers and end up, I mean, driving the class insane and everyone lose the focus because of that one student. Do you have any funny one for that, or let's
I
skip for
mean,
the other?
a class I took as a student, I remember, and this would happen repeatedly, where just people had things going on in the background, because people are at home, and as obviously you can tell, uh, people live with other people and they're doing things, and so it's kind of hard for students to control the environment that they're in when they're at home. Um, I guess this isn't really a funny story. I'm just more agreeing with you, whereas these things happen where noise happens, video feeds cut out, the internet is choppy, so they come in and out. Um, I think I think that gets back to what we were saying about the difference, or not treating online classes like you're just moving the classroom online. You have to adjust to the different medium. And that means that the teacher's not going to have the same control that they do in the classroom. And I think the teacher has to be prepared to, relinquish a little bit of that control, because it's just not the same.
And the satisfaction. Do you think the teacher's take is a good satisfaction? Because I used to teach in the classroom and I have this feeling of mission accomplished when I finish a class or the student understood something. That is not really happening nowadays with online teaching. I feel like I don't have the contact, I don't have the feedback anymore with the students. How do you see that?
Um, I guess for me, that sort of thing, satisfaction, it really comes down to, I guess, the energy that the students are giving off. And I guess it would be different in energy in a classroom, but I think I still get that online. It's just really about the students, I suppose. It could be difficult in a big group because, the students they're less comfortable speaking, I think, online, because you're like, oh, you don't want to talk over anybody. So I think that can create problems. But I think there's ways around that, especially in smaller classes where you can still get that energy from the students as long as are doing a good job, I guess. As long as the student is still satisfied, I think you can still get that satisfaction as a teacher as well.
All right, that sounds great. Steven, thank you very much for today, and I hope we can continue this conversation some other time. All right?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, all right. So, everybody, this was Steven and his thoughts on the advantages and disadvantages of ESL online teaching. Thank you for watching today, and I hope you come back. Bye.